I got one of them. Hi. Yeah. Look, he's so fluffy. You say hi? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're here to talk about cats and books, but mostly books. This is my June wrap-up for 2022. So let's talk about all the books I read in the month of June. Okay, so the first book that I finished in the month of June is Ye Olde Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. This book I have mixed feelings about. So far it's been my favorite book by Charles Dickens. Oh, we're down. This book I have mixed feelings about. So far out of all of the books that I've read from Charles Dickens, it is my second favorite. Christmas Carol being my first favorite. But in terms of like Christmas Carol is up here, all the other books are down here, and then Ye Olde Curiosity Shop is like here. So there's a big gap between my favorite and my second favorite. There are a lot of things that are working really well in this novel. I loved the themes that were discussed. He went really in depth on parentification. We have false imprisonment, we have spousal abuse, we have people trying to take advantage of a young child. Oh, let's go over the plot. Let's start there. So we have an old man who has slowly gambled away his granddaughter's fortune, but everybody still thinks that he's rich or that he's about to come into money and start giving it away to his granddaughter. And so in order to hide from them and hide from everybody who's trying to get money out of him, he and his granddaughter flee and essentially become destitute and homeless, and he loses his mind. And the granddaughter Nell is now responsible for taking care of her invalid grandfather, trying to feed them, trying to shelter them, trying to figure out how to live on the streets essentially in London in the 1800s, I think. I think it's the 1800s. So that's the story, and there are a lot of elements to it. Like there were several elements of things that I was laughing out loud as I was listening and reading it. There were several things that I was like, why is this here? This novel felt very long. But also I didn't really give it a ton of attention. It took me 2.5 months to get through this, and I listened to a lot of it on audiobook, and I think that destroyed my reading experience. So in the future we'll just be reading it. I would probably give this a 3.5 stars. But I'm betting that the more into the later Charles Dickens works we get, the less I'm gonna like this. We are watching Dickens get better and better and better at writing, and this is by far and away much better than Oliver Twist. There's many of the same elements where we have this villain who is persecuting this small human, this young teenage human, and that is very prevalent in this novel as well, but I felt like the villain was more realistic, the main character was more realistic. I would read Ye Olde Curiosity Shop again, as opposed to Oliver Twist, that I will never intentionally read again unless I'm stuck in a college class where I have to. And I was underwhelmed by Oliver Twist. And this one, I wouldn't say I was underwhelmed, but I wasn't overwhelmed by it either. So 3.5 stars, with the potential for that to drop down to 3 stars, 2.5 stars. I don't know. I don't know where to rank this because I haven't finished all of Charles Dickens' work. Was it too long? Yes, but I did mostly like it overall. I really liked Nell as a character. I really liked the way the relationship with her and her grandfather played out. Well, I didn't like it. It made me quite angry at many points, but that was good writing on Charles Dickens' part. Would I recommend that people read this? Maybe. If you're into research about parentification or spousal abuse, false imprisonment, evil lawyers, this might be right up your alley. If those things don't interest you, then maybe pass that one by. The next book we have is The Inner Circle by Brad Meltzer. This I give 2 stars, and the reason it's rated that high is because I feel like Mr. Meltzer, Brad, can we call you Brad? Brad is a good writer. There were several descriptions or descripting factors that were done really well that stuck with me even when I wasn't reading the material. I would say that the sentences were kind of choppy because they were all very short. That is very common in thriller novels, however. I forgot to do the plot description again. Let's see if we can do that for the third book too. Okay, so this book follows an archivist, and I don't even remember his name even though I spent 400 pages with him. An archivist in Washington, D.C., and he discovers something that has been left for the US president that is potentially a conspiracy. And what that conspiracy is, or what happens if he doesn't or does do something about it, is not ever really made quite clear in the novel, which is my biggest complaint and one of the reasons why my score for this is so low. This had a lot of elements of a thriller novel, like the chapters ended on cliffhangers, characters died, the threats and stakes kind of felt a little bit real, there was drops of information that were twisting and turning and shaking us ambiguous all over the place. But the problem is with the main character, I never felt like he was truly in danger, so I was never truly nervous or scared. And so when everybody was like, oh, we have to do this thing, I was like, but why? like I didn't understand. Like, he has this problem and the president's potentially involved and there are potentially people after him. The Inner Circle, that's the name of the book. But we never really know what's gonna happen to him if he gets caught. It's just bad. And I didn't understand why he didn't just quit his job and then move across the country or into a new country and get a new job. This seems much more like his personality to do. So I feel like there were better reasons and ways that he could have involved the character in the plot, and it kind of destroyed the reading experience for me. It also wasn't anything I haven't already read, and maybe it's because this felt like not a bad Dan Brown knockoff, but a Dan Brown knockoff. Not a bad one, but a knockoff. And so I just was comparing it to Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code specifically, the entire time, and I was like, This is also the first book in a series. I will not be continuing this series. I've already given this book away. And I think the rating is low because I have gotten more experience with thriller novels, and I'm not every novel I'm just like, oh, this is amazing, I love this, look how fast the pace is. I feel like this book could have been better put together, and better reviewed. Could I write a book that's better? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that as a reader, as the consumer, I wanted things to be more tightly woven together. That's all my thoughts on that book. Book number 3, Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Cheating. Talia Hibbert. Okay, so this book follows Chloe Brown, who has a near-death experience and realizes that she hasn't lived the life she wants to yet. So she creates a list of things that she wants to do to live a accomplished life, and then pursues those things. And one of those includes riding a motorcycle, which conveniently her very hot neighbor has a motorcycle. This book was delightful. My experience reading this book was a 5 out of 5. I stayed up. I started it and finished it in one session. I started it at like 8 p.m., finished it at 1:30 a.m. the next morning. I loved this. Overall, though, I would probably give this a 3.5 to 4 stars, and I'll explain that in a minute. So, first of all, the writing in here is gorgeous. We had so many lines. Like, there was a line at the beginning describing Chloe Brown that talked about how her voice was harsh and sharp and commanding, like someone had taught a diamond how to speak, and then somebody else described his thoughts as being khaki and just blah, which I don't know. I'm not doing them justice. They were very well written, very gorgeous. The writing was great the whole way through. This is an open door romance, so you're not left in the dark about anything they're doing in the bedroom, and there's a lot of cursey words. So if neither of those are your forte, then skip this one. The romance beats were weird in this book in the sense that, because I'm used to romance as something dramatic happens at 25%, 50%, and 75%. And usually the like final breakup where you like leave each other is at the 75% mark, and then you have the last fourth of the novel to put everything back together. And I felt like she pushed that way out. So like they're doing great, they're having this wonderful time, and then 60 pages to the end of the book, their relationship imploded and exploded, and I'm looking at the rest of the book and going, there are only 60 pages here. And so I feel like it needed to be longer because she kind of just wrapped everything up in 60 pages, and it wasn't very satisfying or believable in my mind that these characters who we'd spent so much time getting to know and to love and to trust, they all of a sudden, they break up for very valid and reasonable reasons, and then they kind of just smushed back together without really resolving the issues that were happening in my mind, and I didn't love that. So the ending really brought down the score for me. So if we ignore the last like 60 pages of the book, I would give that a 4.5 stars. And then the ending just was like 2 stars. Like, I wanted a much more satisfying emotional resolution, and the book focused a lot more on the physical resolution between the two of them. And for some people, that's great, and they love that in their romance. And for me, I really want the emotional connection in order for it to feel satisfying. And so the open door romance going on here definitely drove the plot in some ways more than the plot drove the plot. And so sometimes I felt like the romance got in the way of the plot and in the way of the character growth and development. But that might just be me not being used to reading romance, and so I was just frustrated by that. And I couldn't tell. I don't know. I read more romance than I did, but I'm still new into the world of adult romance, and so I'm still like, do I like this? Do I not like this? How much of this is me? How much of this is the book? But overall, this is an author that I would continue reading. I know that we follow two of the other sisters in different books, and I'm definitely interested in picking up those books and reading them because I thought that they were well done and well handled, and I liked the characters. I thought they were sassy, and I'm curious. The next book is a DNF. The Camel Club by David Baldacci. Did I give this a fair go? I don't know. I read the first chapter 3 times and I was bored, which is why I had to reread it because I stopped paying attention all 3 times. I even checked out the audiobook, and the audiobook didn't help it clear it up. I was confused as to where I was in the setting, which might have been a problem of me not reading it closely enough. There could be all of that going on. But the other 2 factors that I am thinking about as I'm reading this is that this is a story written after 9/11, and the main villains are people of Arabic descent or Muslims, and they're portrayed doing horrible, terrible things in the first 2 chapters, and I'm not interested. I know Muslims, and I know many people of Arabic descent, and this does not match the reality of what I know. And so I put up with it when I read Nelson DeMille's stuff, but I don't feel like putting up with it anymore, so I didn't. And the second thing is that there's nothing here that I haven't read in other books. And this is a complaint that I've heard many other booktubers make, is that with the thriller genre, it has been primarily dominated by white men authors, which is not a bad or a good thing, but it does mean that the market is very saturated. Well, I don't want to say it's not a good or bad thing. That's up for debate. I'm not going to say one way or the other about that, but I do think that the market is very saturated, and many of these authors' writings and the stories that they tell and how they tell it can feel very similar, which I think is why because there are some thriller authors, especially ones written by women, that I do find very engaging and very new and very fresh. So I think, I don't know. I'm not sure where I rest on this. I do want to try another book by David Baldacci. Don't know what that one is, and I do intend to do that in the month of July. But this, I don't know, the Camel Club just wasn't it for me. Like, there was a lot here in the plot that I was like, ooh, I might like this, but I just could not get into it. Will I try again later? I don't know. If I like another book by David Baldacci, I might go back and try this one. If I don't like any more moving forward, it's just gone. I'm not gonna spend time. I'm not gonna do it. Okay, next we have 100 Days of Sunlight by Abbie Emmons. I listened to this on audiobook, and it was a very fast listen. I think it was 7.5 hours, so it was a pretty quick read, listen, whatever we want to call that. And I have really mixed feelings about this. Okay, so let's be honest. The only reason I picked this book up is because I've watched Abbie Emmons, her writing videos and her how-to videos on how to write a book, and I wanted to know if she could also walk the talk. And I go back and forth. I think okay, wait, let's do description. This book follows Tess, who has been in a car accident and has been temporarily blinded for about 100 days, and Weston, he's lost his legs below the knees, and he feels like he can help Tessa, and so he goes over every day to help her type her poetry because she can no longer type because she's blind, and then they develop a romance. And when I was reading the book, I didn't have a lot of problems with the romance. I felt like Weston as a character, the male character, was very interesting, very intriguing. I really loved his story, and I wasn't as engaged or interested in Tessa's side of the story. I didn't particularly bond to her as a character, which can go either way. This is a YA romance. So that didn't particularly bother me one way or the other. I've listened to a lot of other people's commentary on this novel, and some people are saying that you shouldn't take writing advice from Abbie Emmons because she doesn't know what she's doing, she's not traditionally published, and I don't know that I think that's a valid reason. I think many people are very successful who are not traditionally published. I think she does know what she's doing when it comes to indie publishing. I do think some of her descriptions were very beautiful, but there were a lot of moments in this book that I was taken aback and pulled out of the story, and I was like, wow, that's very uber dramatic. There's also a lot of poetry that was written for this book, and I didn't like it, but I'm also not a poetry guru, and I like my poetry to rhyme, so I don't know that that's necessarily a valid criticism. I would give this book 2.5 stars. I think it's a very good first novel, but as far as I know, Abbie Emmons has only published 2 novels, and most of what she's doing is giving a lot of writing advice with 2 published novels, which I don't know if that's good or bad. I think the advice she's giving can be very helpful, and I've heard other people say that it's primarily advice, that she's just repackaging advice from other people. I mean, and if she's not citing it, then that's not good, and I don't know. I really haven't delved, like I haven't watched all of the videos. I just click on things when I think that they're interesting or that they might be applicable to me in writing. I think you can learn a lot from people and their experience in writing. I don't think you have to only take advice from people who have a published degree or a college degree in creative writing. I read some really terrible books by people with masters in English. Really terrible books. So I don't think that just because you've taken college classes means you're a good writer. So I don't think we should gatekeep that way, but also this book was not the best book I've ever read. I do think that it's got potential. So I don't know. Would I read something else by Abbie Emmons? Yes, but I would go into it not expect, like I wouldn't expect that it was going to be something amazing. It's not Karen M. McManus, which is, I don't know, I hold her to a very high standard. I just love her work so much. So it's not that, but it's also not like the trashiest, most terrible writing I've ever seen. But I would say it's not middle ground either, so it's probably more in the lower spectrum. I think it's mostly because she just needs more practice. I think writing a book is really hard. I've attempted to do so multiple times, and it's really hard. The one last complaint that I've seen with Abbie Emmons is that she has a really high score in Goodreads, and everybody's frustrated by the fact that it's so high. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think what's mostly happening there is that she has not reached a she has not reached a broader and wider audience than the people who follow her on YouTube, which means she hasn't really hit mainstream publicity. I think that's all that means. So because I think when you have a following and an audience and they all go and buy your stuff and they're really devoted to you as a person and they just love what you produce because they love you, like that's fine. But the moment you start broadening your horizons and getting feedback from other people who are not your main audience, that's a moment to be like, oh, now I'm getting feedback from people who aren't necessarily just following me because they love me, they're actually critiquing my work. Then it's a moment to be like, okay, like how do I handle this? Do I actually take the critiques? Do I just say, no, you're all stupid, you don't know what you're talking about? Like I have this entire fan base that loves me. Like there's a lot of ways that can be handled, and it has been handled poorly and well and blah 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 blah. Anyway, okay, I think that's all my thoughts on this. We're gonna keep moving on. And the last book is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. There were so many things that I thought were working really well in this book, but it really, really needed a good editor, because the plot, like we have the major plot points, they were just not woven together. This is a retelling of Lord of the Flies with a feminist twist, and I really I don't know, we'll get into that. It's a Lord of the Flies retelling of girls stranded in a boarding school on an island, and there is a pandemic called the Tox that is affecting all of their bodies, and they are stuck on the island in quarantine trying to survive. That idea itself is very interesting and very intriguing. This novel, however, does not follow that at all. There's like barely discussion on the survival that they're trying to do, the emotional impacts that's happening. Most of it revolves around the main girl, and I can't remember her name. Don't know. Wasn't that impactful apparently in my mind. The main girl discovers a plot that the older people, the headmistress of the school, is hatching and she's trying to kill all the girls, and it's just, I don't know. And I haven't read Lord of the Flies, and so I don't know how good a retelling it is. Is it a feminist retelling? I don't know, because I don't think that there's anything here that you couldn't also change. Like, if you just swapped it out for a bunch of boys in boarding school, I don't know that this would change the story dramatically. There's like a very small, there's like 4, maybe 5 sentences that talks about how it's their hormones that are keeping them alive and helping them survive the tox, the plague. But that's really not discussed or expounded upon, and so I don't know. And then you start walking through the novel, and some people really love it, and other people are like mildly on board with it, and then the ending just kind of takes it all downhill. And I would say I was in the latter camp. Well, I mean, I don't know that I was fully on board. I was politely interested. Let's put it that way. I was politely interested for the first 25% of the novel, kind of weirded out to the middle, and then the last half I was like, what are we doing here? There's a gigantic bear attack twice. Somebody gets infected with the plague, and then they try and kill everybody. Like, there just is not an element of survival to it, like the way that the book is kind of, it's sold as being a survival tale, and I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't know. I feel like it had a lot of really good potential, and the writing was really good. There were a lot of really good descriptions. There was a lot of, like, it's kind of a grimdark tale, and there were aspects of that I really enjoyed and thought were really well written. Well, enjoyed is a strong word. I was horrified, and it was well done. But in terms of like the overall plot and where all the characters went and the impact that the story had, I feel like all of that needed to be brushed up and cleaned up a lot more before it could have had the most potential and the impact. I feel like maybe the editor didn't do their job well enough, or maybe they didn't get wide enough beta reader range. Is it a good first novel? I think it's a really good attempt at a first novel, and I hope she writes more, because I think she could go a lot of really good places. I know she's written one other book that I might pick up that I would be hesitant, I guess, just because it's hard to invest so much in a book that just like tanks on the last. Again, I don't like spending a lot of time on a book and then have it end stupidly. Like that's a pet peeve of mine, apparently, that I'm really frustrated with. Anyway, I think that's all the books I read. So that's all I have for you. I will talk with you all in another video. Bye!